Okay, I see the attendees have started to level off, so we'll go ahead and start the webinar. Welcome to this Accurate Academy webinar on actuarial modernization. I am Tom Holmes. I'm the Chief Actuary for the US region for Akur8, and I am joined today by Jen Jabben, and I will let her introduce herself.
Thanks, Tom. Good morning. I'm Jen Jabben. I lead the actuarial advisory services at EY and am focused on actuarial transformation.
Excellent. So this today's webinar is on actuarial modernization. First, we will define what actuarial modernization is. Then we're going to go through various steps on preparing for actuarial modernization, the planning phase, the roadmap phase, and then finally we'll go over some pitfalls, both in the planning phase and the rollout. There's various things you'd want to consider to make sure it goes as smoothly as possible. So first, I'm going to pass it off to Jen to frame and answer the question of what exactly are we talking today? What exactly is actuarial modernization?
Thanks, Tom. And I think it's good to start by appreciating the difference between actuarial modernization and actuarial transformation. These are both terms that are used to describe changes within the actuarial profession and the industry at large. However, they refer to different scopes and degrees of change. So from a modernization standpoint, you're usually referring to the process of updating and improving traditional actuarial methods, tools, and techniques. The process is often driven by advancements in technology, changes in regulations, and evolving market conditions. The main focus of actuarial modernization strategies are to ensure that actuarial practices remain relevant and efficient in a changing environment. This would include things like adopting new software and data processing technologies to handle large volumes of data more efficiently, implementing updated modeling techniques and processes that make use of machine learning and AI, enhancing the quality and speed of reporting and analysis to meet regulatory and business needs, streamlining processes to improve efficiency and reduce manual interventions, and evolving actuarial education and continuing professional development to include modern tools and approaches. Modernization would typically involve incremental improvements and optimizations of existing systems within the current framework of what the actuarial team does for, within a company or a firm. This would absolutely embrace new methodologies, and that will be a focus of our conversation today. To contrast the modernization with transformation, when I think about actuarial transformation, it refers to a more comprehensive and profound change in the actuarial function itself. So this can involve a fundamental reassessment of the role actuaries play within an organization and the industry, so potentially leading to a significant change in how the actuarial services are delivered. So when you think of transformation, this may include things like reimagining the actuarial function, strategic contributions to the business, moving beyond traditional roles and areas like strategic risk management, product innovation, and decision science, restructuring the actuarial department's operations to more closely aligned with business objectives and outcomes. And it's really a shift in the organizational paradigm and the role actuaries are playing in business leadership and strategic decision making, oftentimes changing the organizational culture, and becoming more adaptable, innovative, and responsive to market development. So transformation really implies a more radical redefinition of the actuarial landscape and is a departure from traditional practices to a more future-facing and integrated approach. So as we get into the conversation today, again, we're going to be really focused more on what I described as modernization strategies, leaving the transformation conversation for another day.
Thanks, Jen. So now that we've defined what actual modernization is, we need to talk a little bit about how to get started. So I mean, that's the first question is, okay, we want to do this. We want to modernize. Everyone wants the next new thing. But when you think about how to get started, the first thing you should think about is exactly why you are starting this actuarial modernization process. And part of this is don't change just because everyone else is doing this. You have to have a specific reason for your business. And to back this up, this is a survey that was put out across actuaries on what tools should be used for insurance. And honestly, Excel is very good at a lot of things. Actuaries, we all love Excel. I'm sure everyone has used this. He has uses it multiple times a day. Um, so there are things that are actually good in Excel. Don't make your modernization, oh, we want to use all these brand new tools when something already exists that is very good for certain problems. On the other hand, you do see that R, Python are definitely becoming more and more suitable for various actuarial practice areas. We just want to really make sure that when you're modernizing, it has a reason. So if you think you need to get your processes out of Excel, it's a very good goal, but think about why. Think about the benefit to your business. And similarly, if you're thinking about we want to develop our coding skills, think about why we want to develop our coding skills. How is that going to benefit our business specifically? So as we start to define the problem, the next step will be to build a business use case. So define the original problem, propose a solution to it, and then look at the actual benefits and ROI. So if your problem is getting your business out of Excel, your solution is moving it into R, really look at the benefits, look at what you're going to see from that transition. And as part of that transition, we'd really want to encourage you to start doing your homework to have a plan to move this forward. Yes, I'll let Jen speak to this a little bit.
Yeah, just to, to extend on the concept around, solving a business problem and developing a strategy to modernize your capabilities. Getting ready for this modernization process does involve careful planning and strategic analysis, really to ensure that you're aligned with your business objectives and with where the market is. Key components of this planning process include market analysis, cost analysis, risk analysis, and then the development of an implementation plan. And we'll talk a little bit about these elements as the conversation continues. But just to double click on each of them briefly, in a context of market analysis, this really involves understanding some of the external factors that are driving the need for you to modernize. As Thomas mentioned, like, it's not just to be cool or because other people are doing it. You really want to understand what are those external factors. Is there a changing competitive landscape that, if competitors are moving in a certain direction, you don't want to be a step behind the competition. You also want to ensure that your capabilities are aligned to customer expectations, and those needs and preferences are changing. Even in so much as thinking about how the actuarial function integrates with the demand for more digital solutions, personalized services, or faster turnarounds. Even though the actuarial stakeholders and the customers of the actuarial department are oftentimes internal stakeholders, they're still accustomed to certain expectations, and those have been changing. You may also have regulatory changes that are driving a need to modernize, as well as, and this is one of the primary drivers, technological advances that could benefit your practice. Things like cloud computing, data analytics, and machine learning. So the market analysis in terms of gathering internal and external data points, engaging with stakeholders, and considering, kind of market research is really important as you get started on your modernization uh, plan or your journey. The second piece is the cost analysis. So, the cost analysis and understanding the financial investment that's required is important. And you need to not only understand the initial costs, so the upfront investment, and we'll talk a little bit about some of these pieces, but whether that be new technology, resources, or skill development, there's definitely a cost associated at the onset of any modernization journey. But also you need to consider the ongoing expenses. So you may have software licenses, maintenance, different staffing considerations that need to come into consideration over the time horizon of your cost analysis. You will also want to appreciate any cost savings that can be achieved through improved efficiencies or a reduction in error or improved cycle time. And there's a lot of tools or business case kind of frameworks that can be used, but it's really important to have a comprehensive analysis of the cost associated with your program in order to garner the support and the investment from your companies to support the work. The third piece is risk analysis. So, there's inherent risk in changing existing processes, and appreciating those, analyzing them, and getting out in front of them is really important to any modernization process. You'll have operational risks, so the risk related to kind of changing that process that I mentioned, but you'll also have technology risks, so risks that are pertinent to new systems, so reliability, cybersecurity, compatibility with existing infrastructure. So you'll need to go through all of those components. A few other pieces would be, change management risks. So challenges associated with employee adaptation, not only within the actuarial function, but your external consumers of your services, as well as kind of the impact of a transition period to a more modern and contemporary capability. The other two that I'll hit on briefly before we get into the implementation plan would be, the financial risks. So you need to consider upfront the possibility of cost overruns or project delays or unforeseen expenses that you didn't account for. So you'll want to have eyes wide open in terms of the financial risk. And then as part of your risk analysis, you can brainstorm or identify mitigation strategies for each of the risks that come forward. This includes contingency planning and different strategies to mitigate risk as you get into your modernization journey. And finally, the implementation plan. And we're gonna double click into that in future slides. But the implementation plan is super important, and it should really anchor to a very detailed roadmap that includes project goals, timelines, resource allocation, stakeholder engagement, communication, training. That implementation plan is critical, and oftentimes overlooked as folks get into their modernization process. So I think those four dimensions really cover the preparation necessary in order to embark on a successful modernization journey. The other thing as we kind of continue to think about preparing for this is the need to be pragmatic, so practical in your approach and also accountable for your results, right? When you're preparing for a modernization process, it's essential to consider alternatives, weigh them against what your proposed or maybe your preferred approach would be. And by exploring these potential different options, you can provide a comprehensive view of different paths. You can validate your chosen approach and really think through why that is the right path versus an alternative. Because oftentimes, as you begin to socialize your proposed modernization strategy, leaders or others within the organization may question you on, well, why are you choosing this path versus an alternative? Have you thought about all these pieces? So again, the exercise of understanding, is maintaining the status quo, what is the impact of doing that? What are the implications of making changes? How will your proposed change adapt to meet future business requirements or regulatory demands? And then also highlighting the lost opportunities in terms of efficiency or competitive differentiation that comes forward if you were to simply maintain that status quo. You can also think about incremental upgrades and whether those would be an alternative to a more holistic or robust solution. And that may be appropriate given your business or your funding or available budget. Um, and it might also be more of a phased or modular approach to kind of modernizing your technology stack. There are a lot of different approaches, but I would encourage anyone to really challenge yourself to think about what are all the different alternatives, and that will help to strengthen your appreciation for the chosen path. And the accountability piece of this is really important, and that's around kind of measuring your success and holding yourselves accountable to that success. I think in some ways KPIs are misunderstood as being a performance evaluation on the team, but really I think about KPIs as a process to monitor and evaluate your progress. So you want to develop KPIs that are aligned with your business objectives and the goals of the modernization effort, but also are focused on, the performance in terms of, maybe in a case of a technology system up times, process completion times, accuracy levels, operational performance metrics are part of that KPI. You'll also have financial metrics that track your alignment to your cost expectations and ensure that you're generating an appropriate return on the investment. You'll also want to have KPIs that explore customer satisfaction or stakeholder satisfaction, as well as employee engagement and kind of adoption rates with your new processes. So it's beyond just, did you hit your scope and schedule in terms of what you're looking to achieve? You really want to think about key performance indicators that will help you to monitor success. And you'll also want to be mindful of places where you're falling short of those performance indicators and be able to adjust your approach or your your methodology appropriately. So one of the things that before we leave this point, I want to make sure we think about is that KPIs are sometimes difficult because you say, I don't know, right? I don't know what the cycle time could be. I don't know what, what the process efficiency could be. And sometimes folks are hesitant to set aggressive goals. My guidance or my suggestion to folks is, set baseline measures that are reasonable, but are aggressive in some ways, to really challenge yourself to achieve them. And if you can't get all the way to that aggressive goal, you'll certainly have pushed yourself beyond what seems like a very attainable level of improvement if I was to double click on an efficiency component. So I would just say, don't hesitate to put something out there if you're unsure of what the the potential KPI could be, and then monitor it, measure it, and then adjust it if it's found that, wow, we're really not going to be able to be that aggressive with this level of goal. But it's not, it's divorcing the concept of KPIs as a performance evaluation tool for compensation, et cetera, and more of a metric that is guiding the success of your overall initiative. And I think if you can successfully divorce those two concepts, the KPIs can really be used effectively to measure the success of your program.
Thanks, Jen. And we'll want to keep this in mind as we go through our example problem statement here, which is a very, very simple one. We're going to keep it very vague on purpose, just because we don't want to get into the nitty-gritty details. But our problem here is adverse selection. And the example we're going to be going through in this presentation is using new methodologies to improve the rating plan performance. So the KPI isn't, did we use a methodology? It's going to be much more involved than that. So if this is our problem statement, the next thing we're going to do is actually create a plan to address it. Because again, that plan is this problem statement is very general. There's many different things to pay attention to, many different ways to go about it. So this planning component is going to be very, very important.
And as we've discussed up to this point, the planning components and the robust nature of your business plan is really critical. A few of these elements we've touched on already, but this schematic really gives you kind of a high level overview of the dimensions of the business plan. The articulation of the current state, the goals and objectives of your program, the strategy that you're going to deploy, your risk assessment. Those four pieces at the top are things that we covered in detail already in this conversation. But that business plan would also want to include, a detailed understanding of your technology and the resource needs that come along with it, the implementation plan, the financial plan, as we've discussed, any data enrichment that's going to be necessary. Specifically in this use case, that would be something in a large dependency on the success of the program. We talked about risk mitigation, data validation, change management, and then this last piece, we started to explore this concept as we talked about the KPIs, but really the inherent behaviors associated with continuously evaluating your progress and your approach and adapting it. And oftentimes these modernization projects are long in duration, and the environment in which you're operating can change around you. So designing your modernization plan and approach with the flexibility to adapt and continuously incorporate learnings along the way is really important as you think about this holistic plan and approach.
Definitely. And so I'm going to play the role of the practitioner here. We're going to take some of these components and put together an example business plan. Of course, we could go into much, much more depth, flesh out every single one of those components. But here we have our objective, our strategy, our technology. We're still a little bit open on. We're not sure exactly how we're going to address it. But it is necessary to keep an idea of what our change management is going to be. We're going to need to upskill people. We might need to reorganize some of the actuarial departments to make sure we know who is going to be in charge of what part of this process. And as far as monitoring, we've decided that we want something to react to on a monthly basis if possible. And these KPIs are going to have to do with the implementation of the project, as well as this post modernization KPI to kind of evaluate how we have done in practice. And so as I'm building out this business plan, a very important part of this would be to create a roadmap. You don't just want to start and say, let's go. You need actually a plan for moving forward. And so for taking on my data scientist hat, and uh, if I want to use these modern modeling techniques to improve my rating plan, well, here's probably the roadmap that I'm going to put together, because this is really the essentials for building this data science model. Well, you need data first. You're going to identify the data, build the data set, validate it. This is going to be a huge undertaking, a large portion of the product. Then we're going to spend some time building the model. We're going to go through model selections, iteration, validate it, and then move towards implementation. We're going to make our final selections, go through the filing process, and then so from the data science perspective, this is really what's in the purview. So you get the data, you build, you implement. So I guess I'll ask Jen, what do you think of this particular roadmap as part of an actual modernization project?
Tom, I think it's a great start. But I think when you're approaching a modernization roadmap, this feels a little bit more like a project plan for the data science team and less like what I would envision being a more holistic, robust roadmap. So the next slide does help us to understand the different components of a roadmap and why it's crucial. And I think that the title here also says it's also helpful to have a project manager or a project management function aligned to the project. I've oftentimes said as actuaries, we're good at many, many things. Managing a large program with a lot of dependencies may not be the primary skill set. And so, bringing alongside a project manager is always a good practice when you're getting into a modernization project. But a well-crafted roadmap is so crucial for many reasons. But it really is important to provide clarity and direction. So the roadmap actually functions as a strategic plan, and it helps to define the end goal, the steps needed to get there, and it provides a vision for what you're aiming to achieve and ensures everyone is aligned. So it is a communication tool really that serves to articulate your strategy, engage stakeholders. If there are, there's garner investment if needed. It can really be used as a way to ensure that everyone understands the scope, the objectives, and the benefits. It guides resource allocation and prioritization, helps to understand dependencies and manage risks alongside other work that's going on within the organization as well. It helps to, within the concept of risk management, helps to enable prioritization, identify the most critical activities. Oftentimes it's not simply the actuarial function that's participating in these. And so it helps to bring together cross-functional teams, which will have different priorities and different objectives. So it really does function as a good tool for managing the risk of delivery and the interdependencies within the organization, helping to kind of ensure that everyone is aligned. It also helps to measure and track progress, sorry, with established milestones and timelines. The roadmap is a predefined element of benchmarking, and it's crucial for kind of maintaining momentum, making adjustments as necessary, and it manages stakeholder expectations, so it can help to set realistic timelines and provide kind of a visual representation of how the process is modernizing over time. And finally, it encourages accountability and motivates teams. So it assigning clear ownership for each step of the roadmap does foster accountability, ensure that folks who are responsible for delivering extra, components of the process understand their role in the bigger modernization initiative. And even though it is a structured approach, you can design it and build it in a way that provides flexibility to adapt to changes. In whether it be the business environment, market conditions, resourcing, and be a tool to provide an agile response to those components. I think the next slide provides kind of a view of a roadmap, which is more similar to what I'm kind of discussing, in terms of, you'll have not only the data and the modeling components that were present in the roadmap that we started with, but helps to bring in change management, implementation dependencies, modeling, or I'm sorry, the additional appreciation for run the business. But you can see kind of visually the critical path of different milestones or aspects of the project that align to delivering on those key elements that are necessary for the project to continue. You can highlight and visually see places where you may have a market event or a market rhythm that's impacting capacity within your teams, or other inputs into your process. You can see dependencies and alignment to different teams using different colors. It really can be a well curated and maintained roadmap can really be a crucial tool in guiding the overall success of the initiative.
Awesome. And within that roadmap, we have many, many different stakeholders. So as we're putting together the roadmap, it's going to involve many different teams with many different levels of expertise. And while this roadmap will help communicate the whole project to them, it's very important to notice or take note of who these stakeholders are and what their skill sets specifically are. So through the rest of this presentation, I'm really going to divide the stakeholders into these four groups. The senior leadership really guiding the process, business stakeholders that might not be involved in this modernization process, but will absolutely be affected by it once it is implemented. And then I divided the analysts and managers. Essentially, the analysts are the ones building the models, doing the coding. This could be someone with between, I don't know, 0 and 28 years of experience or something ridiculous like that. It could be any level of someone doing the work. And then managers are kind of organizing the work, making sure that it is all going according to plan. And we really need to communicate between all of these different stakeholders and make sure that the objectives are clear and the consequences of this modernization process are clear along the way. And so while we are communicating between these different levels, we need to ask ourselves, how do we communicate? What if a stakeholder is concerned? What if a head of product is concerned? What are each of these different groups thinking about at a different time? If one of these are concerned, these groups are concerned, what do you do? Because changing an organization is hard. And so when you start making changes, another thing that needs to be taken into account is, where do these decisions actually lie? We can have decision by committee, which is generally a very robust way of making decisions, but it can take a lot of time. You could have a single decision maker who is going to make decisions very, 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 very fast, but might not have all the information available to them, might not have all their perspectives. A steering committee might oversee very large decisions, but they probably don't need to oversee the small decisions, which gets us to this last question of, what decisions really actually matter? What decisions are worth spending the time on? What ones need to be escalated versus what ones can be just taken into account at a very low level of the hierarchy? Another one of these, an example of this type of decision might be, if you're building out code, are you going to use dplyr or data table? I'm going to maybe annoy some people by saying, obviously, the answer is data table. But you probably don't need to go up to your steering committee for that. It'd probably be a waste of everybody's time. So where do you need to stop in these in your hierarchy? Who can make the decisions, and what ones really matter to your North Star versus what ones are convenience decisions along the way? So as we go through the roadmap, we really need a decision-making construct to help us navigate who is making decisions at what points. And maybe there are single decision makers for some processes and then decisions by committee for others. And so as we go through this level of communication, we also need to make sure everyone is engaged along the way.
And I just want to underscore that, Tom. I love the way that you articulated the kind of different stakeholders and the value of spending time thinking about your communication and decision making strategy. As we've discussed, there's many different cross-functional teams involved, not only in the development of the initiative, but the consumption and the ultimate impact of the initiative to the business. And so spending time thinking about and setting up an engagement and communication strategy with those cross-functional stakeholders, whether they be, delivery partners or consumers of the service, really does help to drive alignment. It also helps to broaden the practitioners and the actuarial team's scope in understanding kind of the business implications of the modernization strategy, and oftentimes done well can really enhance the overall impact of the delivery, right? Like if you have your sales leadership team excited about the potential change versus scared because they're not aware of what's going to happen. They know something is going to change, but they're, anxious about the impact, right? You can really minimize disruption to your business, set your teams up for success, get a level of support from the organization that really can enhance the overall impact of the modernization strategy. It's a lot. When this is done well, it's really exciting to see kind of the energy of the team that is delivering.
Yeah, the energy is really, really important, keeping everything moving. But how do you get people beyond that initial hump of here's how we're starting to change? And how we need to do that is we need to build out the resources of our team. We need to transition from the planning phase into the actual execution phase of our actual modernization project. And so as you are building these resources, the first question to ask is, what are your resources today? What skill sets are in your team right now? What are your available resources? And then for the skills that you don't have, what level of training is needed? How quickly can you upskill? An untrained team can lead to mistakes, slow progress, frustration. So you have to make sure that training is in time so that you can continue to make progress. Budget is always very important. Do you need to hire additional resources? Do you need to select a vendor to help you with this project? And how can that vendor help you with the resources training above it? So maybe you select a product. I know that Akur8 provides a lot of help along with it. Maybe that alleviates some of your training, but in general, figuring out what you actually have currently is really essential to figuring out what you need. And so as you've gone through each of these items and said that, well, maybe we need training for our analysts, we need some more information about how these advanced modeling techniques work. We need more expertise. Make sure you use all of your available resources to get this training. So first, what are your resources? The CAS has a bunch of resources. Maybe you can look at Stack Exchange for some things. For coding, yes. Actuarial expertise, no. And then how do you get there? How do you build this knowledge base? Where is your community of practitioners. So there are a lot of things at like ICAS events or at other actuarial networking groups. However, maybe you don't want to go to these colleagues that you've met at events who work at competitors and say, hey, I have this great idea to modernize the actuarial profession and do this brand new methodology. That's probably not the best idea. You can get more general discussions with your community of practitioners, but obviously your trade secrets are going to remain trade secrets. And then are there self-learning forums and how applicable are they to your specific project? And this is all important because not everyone has the large company level of resource. So if you're working at a huge company with maybe a large data science department, a very large actuarial department, maybe your knowledge base is just the people sitting next to you, the people in the other departments at this company. But if you're one of a department of one, two, three, four actuaries, really identifying that community of practitioners is going to be very, very important to build out these skill sets. And next, we have project-specific development time. I've heard of a lot of people say, oh, I'm going to definitely learn Python. That's not part of your modernization project. Learning Python is a very, very generic goal, and it can lead to very, very generic learning. So instead of just learning Python, setting some time aside to build a project. I know when I was learning to code, I coded out a solution to Connect 4. It was a game. You say which column you want to put your token in, and the computer can beat or tie you every single time. Very fun project, completely irrelevant to most actuarial modernization projects, but I do think I learned some skills from that. So instead of just learning Python with maybe a generic project, build into your timelines the chance to build a project or to build part of your project in Python for this modernization process. It's going to take much longer. Maybe if you spent a month or two learning Python and then you jumped in, it would be faster. But I would say that instead of spending that month or two separately, spend it on your project, learning skills that are specific to what you're trying to build. And so definitely spend this development time on things that are relevant to your new processes. And then now is also the time to take risks. So while we are talking with people who are putting together these models, I would say if someone has an idea, let them try it out. See what you can get, see what insights your team has. Because you've put together this great team, let them explore. And so if you have an idea, I know that this happened to me. There's someone who is an analyst on a project that I was working on, and they said, hey, I have this great idea. And I didn't think this idea was going to work. And in this case, I just said, well, try it. Because there are really two outcomes. One, the project fails and lessons are learned and skills are developed. Your team learns more about why this idea was good or bad, how it applies, how the methodology works. The other idea is that was quite possible is I could have been wrong. This could have been a great idea. And if it works and the project succeeds, then you have a material improvement to your process. Skills are developed. But as you're building out your skill set, this is how you build out your internal knowledge base. You give people the opportunity to try things, to be scientific about their approach, learn from the project, learn from putting it together. Because this is a modernization project, it's not strictly a line. You're going to learn along the way. So in all case, of course, time box it. Don't give people a year to try out a new idea, but definitely give freedom to your team. Additionally, when we talk about skill sets, these are incredibly varied across your stakeholders. So I stole this from a presentation in the last annual meeting, but there are essentially three pillars of knowledge. which might be your industry and priority knowledge. That's your business use case. You have this data science knowledge, and then you have this implementation and behavioral knowledge. And I would say that each individual person on your team has a T-shaped skill set. You might be very good at data science. I know some about industry and priority, know some about the implementation, or the other way around. And so what is essential as you're putting together this roadmap is communication between these skill sets. So your stakeholders who are very strong in data science need to clearly communicate with those who have the industry knowledge to make sure that all of their assumptions and all of their decisions uh, clearly move from one to the next and are clearly communicated. And so similarly with this implementation behavioral knowledge, it needs to be very clearly communicated between these groups. And not only are we communicating between different stakeholders, we're communicating between different skill sets. And that I think is very, very essential to make sure that we're communicating the right things to the right people and validating it with the right people. And so let's say we've done that. We've done all this communication, we've put together our roadmap, we spent a lot of time preparing. And so I'll say it is all smooth sailing from here. You put everything together, you've done all of your prep. Surely nothing is going to go wrong. Oh no, wait.
Tom,
What
I think I think something has gone wrong.
Oh no. Okay. Uh Crap. It sounds like our data, as usual, is several months behind schedule. What happened? Like, what do I need to, what goes on now when things are behind schedule? So the idea for this particular slide is that even though things are going wrong, even though we're behind schedule, we have identified all of the dependencies. We know who is dependent on data. Hopefully, next time we will plan a little bit better. We will be able to uh, correctly identify the timelines, but of course, data always takes about several months longer than maybe you want it to. So by identifying these milestones and dependencies, we've already accounted for what we would like to see and how to move forward within our project. And so I think Jen is back now. I just gave the general outline of how we are we're a little prepared because of our roadmap. And so we're essentially on the critical path, but I'll let you add on your few thoughts before we move on to the day-to-day pitfalls.
Oh, thank you. And I apologize. I'm not sure what happened with my connection. So glad to be back with everyone. But yeah, I was just, going to kind of reiterate the point that because of the preparation and the work that the team had done, when you do encounter a project, and I feel like as you mentioned, everything is dependent on the data. You will likely not ever plan that time frame, right? So really understanding the dependencies and the alternative paths, because you've already understood that risk, the dependencies, what alternatives you can do, you can quickly adjust and maintain the momentum within the project.
Excellent. Thank you, Jen. And now we're going to move on in the last 10 minutes to these day-to-day pitfalls. So these are items that as we're done with planning, as we're moving forward, you're going to run into these in a lot of different actuarial and modernization projects. So the first one is worthless meetings, worthless information. I know I've said in a lot of meetings, I have actually given presentations that are not valued by my stakeholders. And so there are a series of guidelines that I would recommend to make sure that these meetings are in fact worthwhile for everybody. First, always, always, always tell a story. So this has been presented in many CAS events where we're really starting to tell this story, use these graphed charts. This third bullet point is trivial. However, I would say that it is actually very hard to do. Present relevant information to your stakeholders that is relevant to them, not necessarily to you. I might find this really amazing data science input. It might be something that is fantastically interesting to me, but my product manager does not care. Not at all. It's completely irrelevant. So, and then not only relate information that is accurate, but relate the model accuracy to the business itself. So here is an example of a slide that I could be presenting to stakeholders. The lift chart here shows my observed losses in purple. My new model is in blue. It's much closer to the purple, so it's clearly better. My old model is in teal. And I could say, well, visually, this is much better, and statistically, it's much better. So obviously, we need to move forward with this model. But performance metrics are not business results. And I would say that this lift chart, out of context, is not useful to your stakeholders. You need to explain why it is useful. So instead of that first slide, maybe explain what's going on and say, okay, where customers are getting a significant decrease, our rates are still adequate, and these discounts are deserved. Now it is up to the stakeholders to say, do we actually give these discounts? Who is this completely valid? Do we really want to fully adjust? And then on the other side, there's additional room to penalize these worse risks. Maybe we need an underwriting solution. And by communicating this to stakeholders, you can start making the correct decisions. And so this is part of communicating between the different skill sets. And additionally, you need to have conversations with the stakeholders on the front end so you know what they're paying attention to. You want to know what they're looking for, what they really care about. And if they only care about model accuracy, great. But maybe they care about a specific segment, and you really need to present on that rather than holistic model accuracy. And so again, KPIs will drive results. These are not performance reviews. And so here we want to really differentiate between the KPIs of accuracy, generalizability, these Gini, R squared, deviance, mean squared error, all of these model performance KPIs that data science typically look at are incredibly necessary, but they're not the same as the process-based KPIs. So you'll have to keep track of both of these as you move forward with your project. And then in addition to the KPIs, I would say continuous improvement is necessary to make sure that it stays relevant. So continue development on your presentation styles and skills. Maybe converse with your stakeholders to say maybe they like hearing the conclusion at the beginning. Maybe they like seeing the way you got there and getting to the conclusion at the end. So getting feedback on what people want to see, and also on what they actually care about. Because usually some of these modernization projects, they might span months or years. And very often your priorities will change. Maybe it crosses into the new year, you get brand new goals, stakeholders have new targets. We really need that feedback. So if I could summarize everything, just feedback, develop that trust between your stakeholders and yourself. A second pitfall is this analyst manager gap. And the reason this exists is because we're doing a new method. This is something that maybe the managers haven't done, and yet they're leading these teams that are doing something that they've never done before. So what can happen here is managers might not be coding, they might not see the modeling results day to day. They might fall behind in technical knowledge. They know all of the business results, but their T-shaped knowledge is very heavily in the industry and priority knowledge and not as heavy in the pure data science application. And there are different goals. Analysts are going to be really excited about this new model, this new methodology. You want to create this perfect model. And maybe managers are more focused on the actual business problem. So there is this gap in both understanding and goals. And this can cause some project delays and stress. So if the communications are not happening, maybe the timelines are unrealistic. And additionally, material flaws cannot be identified because if, let's say, an analyst just completely trusts that the initial methodology is perfect, they're not going to bring up things that might be problems. So you really want this communication to say that, well, we're doing this process. Everyone needs to identify flaws, and everyone needs to have the empowerment to suggest improvements. One tool to do this are retrospectives. And so you can ask what worked, what didn't work, what's frustrating. But in the end, this is a regroup every probably 2 or 3 weeks to say what has happened, how it can be better. And you need to get buy-in from the entire team on how to move forward and empower analysts to have an influence in this process. So if you say, can we get this done in 2 weeks? You don't say, we're going to get this done in 2 weeks. You say, is it realistic that we can get this done in 2 weeks? Do you really think that given the resources you have, 2 weeks is reasonable? And if you say yes, you have buy-in, you move forward. And if it's no, you need to figure out why and move that process in the right direction. And so moving on from there, speaking of moving it in the right direction, you need to keep everyone motivated.
And in the process of keeping the team motivated, we've talked at length in this around kind of the complexity and the need to communicate and keep everyone engaged. And this type of work is hard. Oftentimes if you knew how to do it, you would have already done it. And so you're learning, you're exploring new techniques, new approaches. Timelines are undefined. And so keeping the team motivated is really important. And oftentimes, leaders who are, keeping in mind the motivation of the team are going to be more successful. So, there's a few things on the next slide that highlight ways to kind of make sure that the value is recognized along the way. So again, celebrating the small wins, right? Like in projects where the end result or the end model may not implement for 18 months to 2 years, and then subsequent to that you'll still have time to realize results in market. It's important to celebrate the small wins, learn from mistakes. Tom, you mentioned earlier, like testing and learning, letting folks try different things. And failure is not bad. In some case, failure is learning and should be celebrated. Issues that arise and the team's ability to problem solve those, that's part of recognizing and celebrating the work of the team along the way. Incremental roadmap wins, those big critical milestones when achieved, celebrating those. That can look a lot of different ways, whether it be a luncheon or a team event or an outing, or a small snack, even in an office environment. There's little things that you can do and you should do in order to motivate and continue to celebrate the work of the team. Certainly, if you have the means and the ability to do it, shining stars or folks on the team who are going above and beyond. Performance bonuses are always a nice tool if you have the means to do that. But I think it's really, the takeaway here is you want to be intentional and you want to be mindful of kind of recognizing and celebrating the work of the team, because these projects are oftentimes challenging overall, and more often than not you're navigating a timeline miss or a dependency miss or unforeseen resource issues, and so they can be very taxing on the team. So you want to make sure that you're mindful of how you approach this specific piece of it. And I think we had just one more pitfall. I don't want to, spend too much time on the challenges, but hopefully it's helpful for folks as they're getting into, potentially a modernization strategy. And the last one is one that I think is really important, and it's about using your status updates as a signal, not as a score. a scorecard. It's not a reflection of the performance of the team. It's a means of communicating when there are challenges on the horizon. You may have experienced a graphic like this in the past where the project was on track, on track, on track, on track, and all of a sudden it's not. And then people are maybe caught off guard or concerned or frustrated when, if along the way any signal of potential risk or potential challenges would have been acknowledged using the yellow. Often I think people sometimes are hesitant to signal an issue, or even in so much as like the team is signaling an issue but leadership doesn't want to expose that to the broader community. And so really being okay with a status or an update that is yellow or red can help to garner the support that the team needs to overcome any obstacles and move forward. Hesitancy to create that transparency in your modernization journey can be really detrimental. So I would advise that you think about leveraging any status updates as a means to highlight potential risks. The best thing you can do is be green, yellow, green, yellow, green, yellow along your journey, and avoid those kind of show-stopping red, derailers that can arise if you really don't acknowledge and address issues early and often in your project.
Yeah, I have definitely seen this, and it's always bad when that red is not measured in weeks, but months. So absolutely let people know when when there's a potential for things to come down the line, and we can readjust that timeline. So there is actually one more pitfall and a wrap up, and what I will do is encourage everybody to enter questions into the Q&A. Obviously, keep paying attention to the last pitfall, but we will have about 10 minutes at the end to answer any remaining questions. So the last pitfall is also near and dear to my heart. It is statistics versus reality. So this comes from a failure in communications, and this comes when the model does not actually meet business requirements. And this can happen for a variety of reasons. First, there can just be an incorrect understanding of desired results. What are we really looking for? Are we looking for a simple model to just implement for a simple product? Is this an accommodation line that doesn't need to be the most statistically rigorous? And we could have found this out through communication during sprint reviews. We could have explained exactly what the model is doing better in terms that the stakeholders really care about and are able to translate into their um, processes. And so there can also be an incorrect understanding of implementation. And I'll give you one example of this is if there's, let's say, a tiering methodology. You have tiers 1 through 5, 5 being the most risky. And for some reason, it looks like it's getting risky, and then tier 5, wow, my new model statistically has a discount for that fifth one. That doesn't make any sense, and it could arise because you've so heavily underwritten about under against this risky tier that the only people in here are actually very, very good, because you say, okay, you have to be flawless if you have this fifth tier. And so the best model that we've created is now not actually solving a problem. It's going to create more problems because of how we have structured this model. And so how do you start this process? How do you actually solve for this? Well, one, you build trust. You bring up all of the things that you think could possibly go wrong with this model. You make sure that everyone is able to bring up questions that they do understand, and also where they don't. You want your stakeholders to be completely comfortable saying, hey, I don't understand what you mean by this. You want your model builders to be completely comfortable stepping forward and saying, hey, I don't understand what you're looking for in this model. I don't understand how you want this to affect the business. And also setting expectations, setting what is reasonable to expect from the model. Models are great. They can't solve every single problem that you've ever had. And then validating assumptions as well, you're going to have to double check and make sure that what you think you're doing to solve their problem actually solves the problem that they have. So really, this is all, again, feedback, communication, among those three pillars, among those four stakeholders, making sure that everything is correctly understood. And so lastly, we're going to say go forth and modernize. I changed the font, so sorry about that, number two. But we've defined actuarial modernization. We've prepared you for it. We've given some common pitfalls for this process. And we hope that you do have the tools to move forward with your actuarial modernization. And so as you enter your comments into the Q&A and the chat, I'm going to just briefly highlight some upcoming webinars that we have through Akur8 Academy. On May 2nd, we'll have The Modeler's Edge, Philosophies and Practices in Predictive Modeling by Max Martinelli. He's a great actuarial data scientist and an amazing presenter. If I had to guess, there'll probably be something like 2.5 slides per minute or something crazy. There's always an insane amount of information in his presentations. And following up is Edwin with how to build new products using Akur8, and then demystifying artificial intelligence on June 26th out in the future. So put these on your calendar. You can sign up for our mailing list to learn more about these. And so I haven't seen any questions come through in the chat so far. So maybe I'll pass this back to Jen and just ask the question of how much time would you actually allocate towards preparing an actual modernization? We went through about maybe about half of our time in this presentation was on preparing. How much time in practice would you expect to spend?
Yeah, I think, it absolutely varies based on the scope of the capability modernization, but I do want to underscore the importance of spending adequate time in that space. And I would say generally that phase is somewhere between 6 to 12 weeks of kind of assessment and planning, depending on, the nature again of the capability modernization. But I think, sometimes it feels like a lot of time, right? Invest in preparing and planning, but the return on that investment in terms of execution and delivery is well worth it in practice.
Thanks, Jen. And I agree with that. I also say that when you're building things out from the data science side, in addition to building the roadmap, I would have really clear skies brainstorming sessions with your team of what can go wrong, what do we really want to pay attention to, what are the potential delays in this project, and getting that from the very, very technical side can help you correctly assign the greens and yellows along the way. So even if you've done your preparation in the beginning, continue that preparation as you move forward because things change along the way. We do have one question that came in from the chat, and I'll point this one to Jen first, and it is, you mentioned performance bonuses. Can you speak to the efficacy versus the magnitude? Is this shared up front? Does this get mentioned to the whole team or just or the whole team, or I think just the one who earned it?
That's a great question. And, I think I can say I've seen it effectively used in a lot of different ways. Oftentimes it's anchored to kind of the company culture and any company processes that are associated with it. I would say in terms of the magnitude, I have seen these, range from, a small gift card to allow someone to go out to dinner to a large thousand some odd dollar cash kind of a bonus, and so there's absolutely a variation, but I've not seen this used as an incentive that says upfront there's these things available to the team. Most of the time I've seen performance bonuses used in situations where individuals have gone well above and beyond the expectation of the leadership team. And many times it is kind of an individual one-to-one communication, but most of the time the team appreciates and understands when team members are going that extra mile. And so I encourage folks to recognize that the compensation element or the magnitude of the bonus might be something that's better served to be more individualized. But I think it's great to use these different tools.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. And this is something that's not exactly modernization, but more a managerial piece of advice is that these performance bonuses should not be surprises. Who gets it should not be a surprise to your team. There should be enough communication to know that you really appreciate what's going on, that this is probably that maybe is above and beyond. And you should have enough of a transparent communication with your team so that no one is surprised when maybe they didn't receive one and someone else did. So definitely that communication and transparency managerially is very, very important. So everyone knows what this level of performance looks like. And then there's a question that came in specifically for Jen. What are some operational and performance metrics used in your actuarial modernization projects?
Yeah, great question. I think, most of the modernization projects that I'm involved in are focused on driving efficiency in the organization. So we use a lot of cycle time, like analysis cycle time, or model building, model refresh cycle times, in order to understand kind of the impact of the efficiency gains. There's also oftentimes an assessment around the resource need. If you're trying to simplify the delivery cost of various capabilities, thinking about how to understand the right resources for the right tasks and align the overall cost of delivery. So from an operational perspective, I think the resourcing cost and the cycle time of the analysis are two kind of primary KPIs that we use. And I think from a performance standpoint, that's really dependent on the nature of the capability and the context of kind of the model, some of what Thomas shared around kind of the model performance, business performance. Those are kind of a little more standard in terms of KPIs. But I think the cycle time of the analysis and the resource cost are two primary ones that I would highlight.
Thanks, Jen. And that actually brings us right to time. So thank you, Jen, for joining us on this Akur8 Academy webinar. I think it's been very informative. We really appreciate your expertise on this topic. And I look forward to seeing more of you at the subsequent Akur8 Academy events. Thank you very much for your time today and have a great rest of your week.